Yeah.
Mm.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anjani Vaidyaratna, your host for today. A very warm welcome to this special webinar organized by CMA Sri Lanka to mark International Women's Day 2026. As we begin this important occasion, it is my privilege to have in this audience Professor Lakshman R. Watavala, President of CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. Hennayaka Bandara, Vice President of CMA Sri Lanka, the council members of CMA Sri Lanka, our honored guests, members of CMA Sri Lanka. We gather today at a time of global conflict. There is tremendous amount of economic uncertainty. Extreme weather is disrupting all over the world. These crises are happening at a time of rapid technological change, which is touching all our lives. Automation is replacing routine and many middle-layer jobs. It is at moments of uncertainty and transformation like these that the marginalized and the most vulnerable, particularly the women and girls, often carry the heaviest burden. It is in this context that the Women's Leadership Committee of CMA Sri Lanka find this year's global theme especially powerful. Rights, justice, action for all women and girls. But don't get me wrong, today's conversation is not only about acknowledging challenges. It is about celebrating the women who are shaping solutions, leading change, and most importantly, opening doors for others. This webinar is one of many initiatives by CMA Sri Lanka Women's Leadership Committee to amplify women's voices, leadership, and impact across the profession. So the next person I'm going to introduce is a person I can vouch for living by these values every day. How do I know this? It is because we are ex-colleagues and even rivals. We have in the past, whilst working in the same company as AVPs, competed to get capacity, talent, and rewards for our respective teams. We have agreed to disagree many times, but every time I needed understanding and empathy at work or some no-nonsense feedback from a fellow accountant, she's the lady I turn to. So it is my pleasure to introduce this amazing woman and mentor, the chairperson of CMA Sri Lanka Women's Leadership Committee, Ms. Darshini Watavala, to speak about today's program. Darshini, over to you. Darshini is a director at Deloitte Partners, a fellow member of CMA Sri Lanka and CA Sri Lanka, and holds a Master in Financial Economics, along with a Bachelor of Science from University of Colombo. Darshini, over to you.
Thank you, Anjali, for those kind complimentary words. So good afternoon, everyone. Professor Lakshman R. Vatavala, President of CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. Hennayaka Bandara, Vice President of CMA Sri Lanka, Council members, our keynote speaker, Ms. Dilrukshi Surya, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you warmly to this year's International Women's Day celebration organized by CMA Sri Lanka. Today, we gather not only to celebrate progress, but also to reflect on the challenges that remain and to renew our shared commitment, building a world where every woman and every girl can thrive equally, safely, and with dignity. This year's global theme, Rights, Justice, Action for all women and girls, is not just a statement, it's a call that reminds us that rights are not favors, They are fundamental human entitlements. Justice is not optional, it is essential for equality and peace. And action is not the duty of a select few, but it is a responsibility that we all share. Across Sri Lanka and the world, women and girls continue to demonstrate strength, resilience, and leadership. Yet many still face barriers to education, economic opportunities, representation, safety, and recognition. As professionals, leaders, and members of society, we have a responsibility to help remove these barriers. And not just tomorrow or not someday, but today. At CMA Sri Lanka, we remain deeply committed to fostering women's leadership, financial empowerment, and professional development. The Women's Leadership Committee continues to champion mentoring and career guidance, opportunities for capacity building, recognition of women who lead, and platforms such as this, which spark dialogue, debate, and meaningful change. We firmly believe that when women are empowered, communities flourish, governance strengthens, and national development accelerates. As Anjani also mentioned, we are meeting here at a time when the world is navigating rapid and complex shifts. The geopolitical tensions, economic challenges, and fast advancing technologies. In such times, ensuring women's rights, equitable access to justice, and full participation is not only a moral imperative, it is a national priority. We all know that women are included, economies grow faster, and organizations perform better, communities become safer, and societies become more equitable and resilient. We have a meaningful and inspiring program lined up today for you. We will begin with remarks from the President of CMA Sri Lanka, followed by a keynote presentation from Ms. Dilrukshi Surya, who will offer a deep and thought-provoking perspective on this year's theme. We will then move into a dynamic panel discussion moderated by Ms. Samantika Ariyavasam, member of the CMA Women's Leadership Committee and a member of CMA Sri Lanka. Our panelists, exceptional leaders in their field, will share real-world insights, challenges, and strategies for creating sustainable impact. I encourage you all to listen, learn, and be inspired. As I conclude, I want to leave you with this thought. International Women's Day is not only about honoring women, it is about renewing our commitment to change. Every action, however small, brings us closer to a world where a girl's dreams are never limited by her gender alone. A woman's voice is never silenced, her opportunities are never restricted, and her safety is never compromised. Let us carry forward today's spirit and continue to be champions for equality, for dignity, and for justice. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Darshini, for those thoughtful opening remarks. And now, my great honor to invite the President of CMA Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman Vatavala, to address the audience and share his reflections.
Good afternoon to all our ladies who are present here on the panel. The chairperson of the Women's Leadership Committee and the committee members, and also our council members and vice president, the participants who are present here. Let me first of all congratulate the Women's Leadership Committee for continuing these webinars and seminars that we have been having, organizing on to celebrate International Women's Day. today we are, of course, doing it online via Zoom. And today we are very happy that maybe the digital format has enabled us to connect from anywhere, any place, and of course, any time that we want to do it. Let me also recognize our keynote speaker today, Dilrukshi Kurukula Surya. He is executive director. Now, that's something I am sure that would put all the women on the higher ladder because that she is there. And also, I can see there are others who are having very high positions in their commercial and other fields. And I must also say that we have one or two special invitees who are also not our members. Of course, one is Ms. Dr. Vagisha Gunasekara, who is with the United Nations. So I'm sure that they will all have different maybe points of view on the Women's Day, because the topic today is quite wide, where we speak of rights, then the justice and action for all women and girls. I'm sure that this discussion is going to be something very useful to all women and girls, but also to the men, because men should listen to the women if they are to go in the right direction. I would just like to point out two things which just to keep it in your mind. One is, of course, the employment position of women, where it is spoken everywhere, where they say it is 35%, and whether how we can really bring it up. From our CMA, we have been looking at this very seriously, and I think even the Women's Committee has been involved in it. One major thing is like what we did in the COVID time, where women work from home. Now, I don't know whether, I'm sure Dilrukshi would be able to tell whether this is legally, maybe, although everyone is doing it, legally it has really been accepted. But if it is something that is really accepted, a lot of the firms, of course, a lot of the firms are doing it. But whether the government can do it, I don't know, because sometimes more people working from home might bring better results in certain cases. Now, one way that I was thinking that we can do it from the accounting sense, I've had some discussions with some of those in the BPO field, where they feel that women could be trained in different areas of accounting, and also maybe certain specialized areas, and of course with the IT background, that they will be able to be employed and they can do work from home. So this might be one way that one can look at it, but we have to really make it a reality and go ahead, because I'm just saying this because in India, how the expansion of the IT sector took place is due to the education in the IT area. So if we are able to, maybe, since we know that there's a large women population that is there, if we can maybe get them engaged in this area, but also with the working from home will give them more flexibility and may be able to continue both their household duties as well as uh, the employment which will help them. The other area I just want to keep, maybe you all may have seen that last year there has been a decrease in our population. Since we are a aging population, this is a very serious matter, because then we will be having more people who are senior citizens rather than the younger people who are there. And one particular reason I see in this is also our the education feel that this is really something that has been going on for some time, and now it seems to be really affecting the crux of the whole thing of the population, because you see, students finish their education in the schools at a particular date and time. and there is a set timetable where they have to sit the exams. Because recently there have been some problems due to certain disruptions that have taken place. Then those days, the a university graduate would come out at 21 or 22, which means then they are at a younger age going into work, uh, and then maybe even doing higher studies, and then of course maybe even getting married early. But now the current situation is such that maybe most of them, when they finish their degree, they are 24, 25 or 26. So which means the best part of their life has been, so these not only for women, but these also for men. But we have seen very few people speaking on this. But I would like on this International Women's Day that the women should take it, because because I said the earlier thing of this population decrease that has taken place, which I have a feeling is due to this matter. I'm sure you all will be able to discuss it and then see. So these are two matters I thought that I will just put it because you are very important people who will be able to look at this in a very maybe a manner that will really help and also bring it to the authorities. So thank you very much, everyone, for especially I must thank all our uh, the keynote speaker and the panelists for the for accepting our invitation and being here, because it is indeed a great honor for CMA to celebrate International Women's Day with such eminent ladies or women who are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for giving us that social factor for this dialogue, which paves the way to next speech by Ms. Dilrukshi Kurukula-Surya. As Professor mentioned also, she is the Executive Director of Demo Engineering PLC. Ms. Kurukula-Surya is an attorney at law with an executive MBA from University of West London and brings with her a distinguished career spanning human resource strategy and industrial and labor law. Her expertise in managing employee relations and workplace conflicts give her a unique perspective on navigating today's complex workplace challenges. Throughout her career, Dilrukshi has consistently championed diversity, inclusion, change, and innovation. She was the first woman appointed to the board of directors at DEMO and continues to focus on inclusive talent development and increasing women's participation in the workforce. Hence, it is my pleasure to welcome her today and to hear her perspective on this important topic and also some of the key interesting areas Professor touched upon. Thank you. Over to you, Dilrukshi.
Thank you so much, Anjani, for that kind words. And good afternoon, everyone. Professor Watawala and the chairperson, Ms. Darshi Watawala. It was very important, the sentiments that were expressed by the professor and the previous speakers. Of course, professors touched upon work from home or remote work perspective. So today, when you consider work from home or remote work, it has become very common globally, especially after the pandemic. But the legal framework supporting it vary from country to country. So in many countries, we do not see proper a framework or provision for remote work, including Sri Lanka, because we rely on the existing frameworks. So, as I said, currently no comprehensive standalone law that specifically governs remote work or work from home arrangements. So most organizations still rely on existing labor laws such as shop and office and wages boards, wages board ordinance, and general employment contracts. especially, there are no provisions that we see. So what does working time or working time means, right? So when you are at home, and if you get into an accident, how do you define it? We do not have laws. So these are very controversial areas that we need to address. But in contrast, several other countries have developed more structural legal provisions. For an example, countries in European Union. So they are far ahead of us. They have rights within labor regulations covering aspects such as working hours, employee well-being, data protection, and employer responsibility for equipment. Some countries like Portugal and Spain even have laws that regulate employee communication outside working hours and define the employee's right to disconnect. So I think we, in terms of law and such framework, we have a long, long way to go. So, I mean, if you consider Australia or UK, similarly, they also have different arrangements. I mean, if you work from home, they provide the utilities that are required to carry on or conduct that work from home. So, these are contemporary HR matters. Not traditional IR, ER matters. These are some of the contemporary HR matters that we have to find out. And this is my response to the area that Professor touched upon. I think coming back to the keynote, I know as students, professionals, and leaders, we all contribute to shaping the environment we work and learn in. So this year's International Women's Day theme reminds us that advancing rights, justice, and action for women and girls requires collective effort from all of us. Very rightly, as Professor mentioned. So it is not women's responsibility to achieve this. It is everyone's, and especially men who are in high positions. They are the ones who has to drive this. We will discuss why it is. So let me begin with a question. When we talk about women breaking barriers in leadership, we often celebrate few extraordinary women, the ones who broke the glass ceiling. Isn't it? But today, I want us to think about something different. What if the real goal is not to celebrate one or two remarkable women, but to create a world where many women succeed, lead, and thrive? Isn't that what we want? So Sri Lanka's history gives us an interesting place to start. In 1960, our country elected the world's first female prime minister, Madam Sirimawa Bandaranayake. At that time, many nations were still questioning whether women should even have an equal place in politics. Yet Sri Lanka showed the world that leadership does not belong to one gender. That's long ago. Much before the gender equality or equity became a buzzword. So years later, Sri Lanka again elected a woman prime minister, Madam Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, who later went on to become president. And today, history has added another chapter. In 2024, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya became the third woman prime minister of Sri Lanka. 3 women prime ministers in our nation's history. For a country our size, that is something remarkable. But here is something important to reflect on. These women are often remembered as exceptional pioneers who broke barriers. And of course, and they absolutely deserve that recognition. But if we truly believe in equality, the goal should not be that only a few women become remarkable enough to break through barriers. Right? I mean, we give all that credit. It is exceptional that these women and many others have achieved remarkable positions. But the goal should be something bigger. The goal should be to build a world where women succeeding in leadership is no longer remarkable. It should be normal. When the women we celebrate today are not the only names in history, but simply the first among many, many. This is where the theme of this year's International Women's Day, rights, justice, and action, becomes deeply meaningful. Deeply meaningful to me, of course. Rights are the foundation. These have been there. We have seen treaties, conventions, laws, everything. So we have, even by constitution, it is established. Equal rights, right? Every woman must have equal access to education, opportunities, and the freedom to pursue her own ambitions. Rights ensure that every girl growing up today can imagine a future without limitations imposed by gender. But rights written in laws alone are not enough. That is where justice comes in. Justice means those rights must work in real life. It means equal pay for equal work. It means safe workplaces. It means respect, representation, not in the corporate leadership, but also in politics, not just 2 or 3, but many. Justice means women are not just present in the room, their voices shape the decisions being made. That is what is important. And finally, we need action, because progress never happens automatically. Action happens when organizations recognize talent and promote capable women into leadership. Action happens when workplaces create environments where women can grow and succeed. Action happens when we encourage girls to believe that leadership is not extraordinary for them, it is possible. So let me share a thought with you. Somewhere in Sri Lanka today, there is a young girl sitting in a classroom, just like many of you. Some of you, not, yeah. Maybe she is in Colombo, Kandy, or Jaffna, or anywhere. Can be even from a small village somewhere in a country. She's listening to her teacher, writing in her notebook, and quietly imagining what she might become one day. she might become a scientist. She might become an entrepreneur. She might become a leader. Or perhaps one day she might become prime minister. But the future she reaches should not depend on her being extraordinarily enough to overcome barriers. So this is my thought. This is what I have always believed. I am not remarkable. I just want to be one among many remarkable women. So it should depend, but the future she reaches should not depend on her being extraordinary, right? It should depend on a society that removes those barriers altogether. And who can do that? Not just by women themselves. We need allies. And we see today very progressive males who are allies to us, just like the leadership of this organization, very progressive. I mean, I have been part of this Women's Day program some years, many years actually, some years back. I've been a part of it regularly. So, because true equality is not when we have one or two women who break the glass ceiling. True equality is when there is no glass ceiling left to break. We talk about glass ceiling, but equality is when there is no glass ceiling to break. So today, as we celebrate International Women's Day, let us certainly honor the women who came before us, who have achieved. It was difficult because still no country has achieved equality. You name one country that has achieved equality? No. There's no industry that has achieved equality. But also, let us remember something even more important. The goal is not to create few remarkable women. We should remember this. And I'm sure, there may be a lot of students or other young females who have connected listening to this keynote speech. The goal is to create a world where every woman has the chance to realize that she is remarkable. That is why we talk about rights, justice, and action. We already have rights. Almost many countries, except for few, have established equal rights. There's justice. There's a system that can be implemented justice. But what is missing is everyday action. So, and when this happens, we will not just have a few names in history. We will have generations of women shaping the future. Because when women move forward, as the chairperson said, families move forward, communities move forward, and of course, nations move forward. This is what this Women's Day has coined as give to gain. When women are given an opportunity, everyone gains, everyone wins. Families, the communities, nations, and entire world wins. So let us turn rights into reality, justice into practice, and everyday action into lasting change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dilrukshi. A great start to today's dialogue to break that glass ceiling, to get every girl that chance to realize a dream. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to move on to our next session, which is a panel discussion. You know, at CMA Sri Lanka, we promote not only professional excellence, but also diversity and inclusion. In that spirit, we have brought together a panel of accomplished women leaders from business, finance, economics, and sustainability, and entrepreneurship, united by this year's theme, rights, justice, action, and for all women and girls. To moderate today's panel discussion, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Samanthi Karewasam, member of CMA Sri Lanka Women's Leadership Committee, a director, finance at Hemas Hospitals PSC. Samanthi brings extensive experience in financial leadership, strategy, and having progressed through senior roles across major multinational organizations. She holds an MBA from University of Sri Jawadarapura. She will be joined by Ms. Nayana Ranatunga, an entrepreneur with experience in international marketing and business development. As the founder and CEO of Senigma Holdings and Senigma Natural, Nayana is a recipient of several prestigious accolades, including the Presidential Export Award and NCE Export Award. Dr. Vagisha Gunasekara, country economist and UNDP Sri Lanka, with a PhD from Purdue University, USA. Vagisha is a macro and political economist, researcher, and policy analyst with progressive experience in academia and development research. And Ms. Chamila Kure, chair of SAFA Women's Leadership Committee and a fellow member of CA Sri Lanka, CIMA UK, and CPA Australia. Chamila is a seasoned finance and accounting leader with experience across diverse industries and is at present the General Manager, Hemas Center of Excellence. Ms. Eranthi Premaratna, an ESG consultant and former industry leader who holds a Bachelor of Science from University of Colombo. Eranthi brings in decades of experience working as a director and general manager in the global textile, apparel, and footwear value chain. And she works extensively on gender economic inclusion and mental health in topics with diverse stakeholders. Samanthi, over to you to take it forward.
Thank you, Anjali. I take pleasure in welcoming you all to today's panel discussion. As we mark the International Women's Day and reflect on this year's theme for UN Women, rights, justice, action for all women and girls. This theme reminds us that gender equality is not simply an aspiration, it is a commitment. Around the world, women and girls continue to face barriers to their rights, equal opportunities, and access to justice. In fact, globally, women still hold only a portion of the legal rights that men actually enjoy, highlighting the work that still lies ahead. Today's theme is a powerful reminder that gender equality is not only about recognition or celebration, it is, in fact, about ensuring that women and girls everywhere can fully realize their rights, experience fairness and accountability within the systems around them, and see real action that leads to meaningful and lasting change. International Women's Day, therefore, not only a moment to celebrate achievements, but also a call for action. It challenges us to ask important questions. How do we ensure that rights are not just promised but protected? How do we make justice accessible and fair for all women and girls? And most importantly, how do we turn conversations like this into meaningful action? Today's discussion brings together voices from different sectors and industries, which is particularly important because the challenges and opportunities often look different depending on the systems we work within. Yet, the goal remains the same, ensuring dignity, opportunity, and equality for all women and girls. As we begin our conversation, I would like to open the forum for our panelists to reflect on a few key dimensions of this year's theme, taking 2 to 3 minutes each. May I now invite Dr. Vagisha to start the conversation.
Thank you very much, Samanthi, and good afternoon. And thank you to CMA for the invitation, especially Professor Vattavala, who reached out. I'd like to approach this year's theme, rights, justice, and action, from an economic and business perspective. Very often, discussions on women's empowerment are framed as social issues, but from the perspective of economists, I would say, also from the perspective of accountants as well, this is fundamentally a question of how efficiently an economy uses its human capital, right? Now, Sri Lanka presents a striking example. Today, only about 1/3 of women of working age participate in the labor force, compared with nearly 70% of men. That means a very large share of educated and capable talent remains outside the formal economy. From a business perspective, this is not just a gender issue, it's actually a productivity issue. And we see similar patterns in entrepreneurship. Women play a very important role in Sri Lanka's MSME sector, but only about 1/5 to 1/4 of MSMEs are owned by or led by women. And many of these businesses remain very small or largely informal, with limited access to capital, markets, and networks. And interestingly, Sri Lanka has relatively strong financial inclusion. More than 80% of women have bank accounts, but access to formal credit mechanisms they're limited for many women entrepreneurs. This means financial systems are reaching women, but not always enabling them to grow productive enterprises. So when we talk about rights, in economic terms, we're talking about right to participate fully in markets, to work, to build businesses, to access finance, and to benefit from economic growth. And when we talk about justice, we're really talking about whether the systems that govern our economy, such as labor markets, financial systems, and corporate structures, provide fair access to opportunity. And then when we talk about action, this is where the private sector becomes central. Companies, financial institutions, and professional communities like CMA, you have a powerful role to play in shaping inclusive workspaces, improving access to finance, and supporting women-led enterprises. Because ultimately, I think gender equality is not only a social objective, it is a smart economic strategy. And if Sri Lanka is serious about improving productivity, strengthening its private sector, and sustaining economic recovery, then enabling women to participate fully in the economy is one of the most powerful growth opportunities available to us. So I'll end there and hand it back over to you, Samanthi. Those are my opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vagisha. May I now invite Nayana, Ms. Nayana Ranatunga, to share her opening remarks. May I now invite Ms. Nayana Ranatunga to share her opening remarks.
Sorry, Samanthi, I was on mute. Thank you, Samantha. From an entrepreneurship perspective, the most urgent rights, as I would see, related barrier women still face is the deep-rooted cultural norms that restrict their autonomy. Even when financial tools, training, and markets exist, many women cannot fully participate because decision-making power over mobility, finances, and time often lies outside their control. These norms limit their ability to register businesses, travel for training, meet clients, or take risks, fundamental rights required for entrepreneurship. Organizations can act their ear by designing programs that engage families and communities, not just women. As Professor Watawala said, so it has to be both sides' effort. Create safe local innovation hubs reduces mobility barriers. Offering digital platforms in a local languages expands autonomy within the home. Institutions can also champion women role models from rural and first generation backgrounds to shift perceptions of perceptions of what a real entrepreneur looks like. Most importantly, organizations must embed gender responsive policies that protect women's economic rights and challenge norms that silence their agency. When autonomy is restored, entrepreneurship becomes a pathway to equality, not just income. When it comes to justice, ensuring justice for women requires transforming the systems that shape their daily realities, not just adding programs on top of unequal structures. Especially in workplaces, HR frameworks must move beyond compliance to inform transparent, pay unbiased hiring and real accountability for harassment. Supply chains need gender inclusive procurement, fair pricing, and visibility for women producers who often invisible in informal segments. Economic policies must correct structural disadvantages, limited land rights, collateral barriers, and the unpaid care burden that restricts women mobility and earning potential. Entrepreneurial ecosystems must shift from male centric norms to gender responsive models that provide women, especially rural and first generation founders, access to networks, finance, and credible platforms. Outsourcing the work cultures must guarantee safe working conditions, predictable wages, and pathways for skill growth. Across all sectors, justice means redesigning systems so that women don't have to navigate bias to succeed. The system itself must enable equal visibility, opportunity, and dignity. When it comes to actionable tasks, a realistic high impact intervention over sector can implement within next 12 months is establishing a dedicated women's investment and incubation fund that provides seed capital mentorship and market access specifically for women-led startups. Over to you, Samanthi.
Thank you, Nana, for bringing that entrepreneurial and views for, I'm sure there are a lot of members in the audience who would totally benefit from that. I now invite Ms. Chamila Kure for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Samanthi. First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank Professor Watawala and CMA Women's Leadership Committee. I think on a continuous basis, this is a conversation that we have been having. And congratulations, Arshi, for continuing on these sessions progressively. Samanthi, I thought I'll just look at it on the last point on the theme, which is the action, and something that we always get into conversation in terms of policies. Many organizations have well-written, very strategic, inclusive and fairness policies, but does it really have an impact when it comes to actions? Does it really translate into action in terms of women empowerment, equality, inclusion that we are talking about, and what can we do in terms of being in corporates, in getting these policies into action. I look at it in a couple of ways. I think for you to translate the strategies, policies that you have in documents, it has to be a change in the organization in terms of its culture, leadership behavior, and the way we make decisions. Perhaps most important factor is leadership accountability. Inclusion become meaningful when the leaders actively champion it. So, your organization needs to make sure that it is being measured and the leaders are held accountable. It is said what get measured, get managed. So why don't we have measures to see inclusion is actually really translating into action from a leadership perspective. On another perspective, how do we embed inclusion or fairness when it comes to women in our daily practices? Of course, we have once in a year women's leadership, women's day coming in, and we are talking all of this. But do we really put it into action when the day is over? So that's where the actual truth comes in. How do we make sure that these practices can get into daily routines of the organization? Little things, maybe, how do organizations hire? How do they promote their employed? How do they develop talent? And that sent across a message to not only to women, but the whole organization, how organization is really seriously taking these policy strategies that they have placed in organization, turning into action. And then do we have time action to listen to women? Do really organization take experiences of employees? Do they have at least employee surveys, listening session, feedback channels, at least an attempt to understand what is the gap between the policies that they have crafted and the reality of implementing those policies when it comes to activating them. And lastly, I think something that organizations also have to think about is mentorship and sponsorship, because it plays a huge role in the development of women and empowering them. So do the organization facilitate that? Do they have opportunities? Do they create networks, peer communities, environment that women feel supported and empowered to grow? And I think it's all put together. It's all about building an inclusive culture in the organization where all of these documented policies, documented intentions, turning into a consistent actions that could turn this into reality if you really wanted to get results of policies that we have crafted becoming actionable.
Thank you, Shamila, for those insightful words. And I think it was a lot of practical aspects that you brought to the forum about what is said and the action that is actually taken. May I now invite Eranti Premratna to share her views with her vast experience in both sustainability as well as also bringing her experience from the apparel field, where there are a lot of females who are employed. So over to you, Eranti.
Thank you. So I really wish to thank CMA for having this discussion today. And I would also, because I'm talking to a group of management accountants, I thought I'll bring in some numbers to begin with. My opening remarks, initial discussion I would like to talk about justice. So justice for women by representation of their voices in decision making. I'm sure all of you are aware, in the apparel industry, majority of the workforce is made up of women. So if you look at Sri Lanka alone, we have about 300,000 directly working in the industry, and out of which about 90% are women. And I would like to give you a bit of a breakdown of these numbers. If you look at the factory floor, as per available data, about 78% are women at machine operator level or at the factory floor level. Then about 40% are at the supervisory level are women. If you look at the middle management, again, about 24% or up to, or about 30%. As you go up the ladder, at senior management level, about 20% again. And then if you really look at the top management, the board level, it's very much less. It's about 3% of women. So where is the justice really in having the women's voices heard when, at the bottom of the pyramid, it's a majority of the workforce is women. However, they're not really being represented in the decision-making level, right? So this is kind of what I really would like to talk to you about in terms of statistics. Then I've done some research in the apparel sector. There are a few companies, the larger companies who have shared their sustainability reports publicly. So I've done some research. And if you really look at the numbers again, that's quite similar. However, what I would like to also impress upon is that with action, with notable targeted action, things can improve. In 2020, Company A, if I call this Company A didn't have a single female at the board level. However, right now, they have 23%. So I think, if you really look at the numbers, it's about 2 or 3. But if you really look at the percentage, it's 23%. So this time in 2026, our theme is rights, justice, and action. And what I would like to impress upon everybody is with targeted action, we could improve the situation. And justice, in the way that I am, kind of speaking, we could probably, hopefully achieve justice if we do have targeted action that we hope to kind of, implement. So that's kind of my, that's what I would like to share during this opening remarks.
Thank you, Aranti. And I think the key message that you brought to the table was the top management commitment and having the will to make a change. And if you do have that, we will have a lot of hope in seeing action being implemented. Let me now get into our panel discussion proper. So my first question will be to Naina. As a woman entrepreneur, what systematic barriers, such as limited access to capital, networks, mentorship, so on, still prevent women from starting and scaling businesses? Nana?
Yes, Samanthi.
As an entrepreneur.
Thank you, Samanthi. As a woman entrepreneur, my journey has been somewhat different. I did not personally encounter many of the barriers that typically hold women back. However, I know that for most women, systematic challenges remain deeply entrenched. Limited access to capital is still the biggest barrier, especially for women without collateral or formal financial history. Many also struggle with restricted networks, which means fewer mentors, fewer market linkages, and fewer opportunities to be seen and heard. Both conscious and unconscious continues to affect how women's ideas are evaluated, funded, and valued. Rural and first-generation women face additional hurdles such as limited digital access, mobility constraints, and cultural expectations around caregiving. Even when women start businesses, scaling becomes difficult without supportive ecosystems, gender responsive incubation, and access to technology. These barriers are not about women's capability. They are about systems that still do not fully recognize, support women's entrepreneurial potential. So mostly the cultural norms is a main barrier, I would say, in women entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Yes, Nayana. And from there, I would like to move to Eranthi again. So, Eranthi, in the apparel sector, the sector relies heavily on women at the factory floor level. Yet, leadership positions, like you correctly said, remain predominantly male-dominated. What structural or cultural barriers, in your view, prevents women from advancing, and how can the industry address them?
I would say I would divide the barriers into two. So there are external barriers that impact on women, and then there are internal barriers that women kind of have built within their own systems. So if you really look at the cultural barriers that Nayana just spoke about, or the structural barriers, all of these can be part of these external barriers, right? If you really look at some of these external barriers, I would say one is the social norms that are translating to corporate leadership. So basically, kind of taking it upon those social norms where women are seen as caregivers, right? This is broad. I mean, we come from society, and we come into our workplaces from society. So we carry that similar kind of, thought process and perspectives. And when we come into our workplace, we still regard women as those who are caregivers, right? So we carry these stereotypes. And then women, we feel, are not able to work at night, carry heavy loads, right? They will get married, will get pregnant, will not be, kind of able to continue in the workplace. So these are some of the social norms that we bring into our workplace. The thing is, while it may be true in some cases it may not be true, and we may not be recruiting the right person, the most suitable person for that particular job, just because we have these stereotypes in our heads, right? I mean, I have personally come across situations while I worked in a particular company. I remember overhearing a conversation where one of the department heads came to the HR and said, get me a colleague ganda for the admin work. So I happened to be there. I asked, why do you want a boy? No, for admin, they're required to work late. They may, be required to go and work, go to the police station if there is an issue. So I said, why can't a woman do this? Right? And that person kind of, stopped and thought about that. So it's a stereotype. We think women cannot do these things that men can do. And therefore, it could have, and I actually gave examples. I said, look at A, B, and C. They do all of these things. I had a person in my team who used to travel from Colombo to the Badulla courts, for a labor-related matter. She left Colombo, her home, at 2:00 in the morning, so that she was in the Badulla courts by 9 a.m., right? So I brought these examples and I said, look, these women in this organization do all this. So what makes you think women can't? So, these stereotypes. So that's one of them, right? Then also unconscious bias and benevolent sexism. So again, that particular example, this man genuinely, thought a woman couldn't do it and that women need to be protected. And therefore, this person, wanting to protect women, not put them in danger, wanted to look for a man instead of a woman. So this benevolent sexism is also an issue where women are protected, however, can also be deprived of the right opportunities, right? And also some of the other things I've also heard, men hold more of the senior positions, as we are all aware, as per the statistics that I shared, right? And sometimes, and this is real, again, I've experienced this. So men would prefer to work with men because they feel uncomfortable, their wives are not happy, that there are women that they work closely with, right? So there are all these external barriers that women have to deal with. And then there are, of course, also the internal barriers. So women underestimate themselves. Oh, I cannot do this. I am not qualified. And I think I'm sure a lot of you would have read these in their, social media or articles where women underestimate. And what I've read quite commonly is that a woman, unless they are 100% qualified for a particular job, or more than 100% qualified, they will not apply for a particular job. Whereas a man, even if they are 40% qualified, they may apply for it, right? So women who underestimate themselves. Then also another thing is women lacking role models, and then therefore thinking, I cannot get there. There are hardly any women, right? It's all, it's a man's world. So therefore not really aspiring to get there. And also another thing, I've again experienced this. Some women, and I mean, I would say even like myself at the moment, like to strike that work-life balance, right? I mean, that's something I personally also want to achieve. I mean, have set out to achieve right now. And I would say I have achieved, is that it doesn't matter. I don't want to be CEO. I don't want to be CEO. I want to be able to work, right? Do good stuff, be happy, be satisfied with the kind of work that I'm doing, but also manage my family. And I, again, have met quite a few women like that who have been extremely capable, and we've offered promotions and they have said, it's okay. Like, even a machine operator, I remember, I was talking to her and she said, Miss, I am happy being a 3-star operator. I don't want to be a 5-star operator because I have my own business. I make string hoppers in the morning. I put to a few kades. I am able to go at 5:30. I'm able to leave the workplace and I'm able to take care of my children after that, right? So if I become a 5-star operator, if I become a supervisor, I will have added work and I don't want to do that. So there are kind of, both, as I mentioned, external barriers, again, cultural norms, structural barriers, and also internal barriers that have prevented women from really being able to express their voices in the decision making. Yeah, so that's kind of my experience.
So, Iranti, in your view, how can the industry address some of these barriers?
Yeah. Samanthi, so I'll tell you, as I mentioned, company A, right? In 2020, the numbers were quite, much less than what they are 2020, 5 years later. That's because this particular company, and I'm sure a lot of other companies, the leadership had a commitment. I think it was Chamila who said there has to be commitment from the leadership. Absolutely, right? There has to be commitment from the leadership. This has to be a top-down approach, right? So if the leadership's committed, there can be a strategy that is formulated, deployed, and implemented. And it's important to have clear goals. Again, as Chamila mentioned, what gets measured gets done, right? And all of you are certified management accountants, right? So it's really important. What gets measured gets done. You've got to have numbers. You've got to understand what your baseline is. And you can set up an action plan with clear milestones, timelines, who's responsible, and by so many years, what do you really want to achieve? So when you kind of have those goals, when you've have to come up with a roadmap, clearly articulated activities. Like I mentioned, I know quite a few companies who've set these goals. and have achieved them to a large extent. So yeah, in brief, if you do I have more time? If I have time, I can explain a little bit more.
Thank you, Aranthi. That was very clear. I think the audience also would how you can, in a structured manner, get about achieving objectives. Chamila, this question is to you. Aranthi spoke about external barriers as well as internal barriers. So my question to you is, how can women build the confidence to step in to opportunities even if they feel they're not fully ready for them?
Yeah, Samanthi, very important question, and I think very much spoken about it. I don't think it's about lack of capability. People think, I'm not confident, or somebody is not confident because that person lack of capability. I don't think it's a lack of capability, but probably the way that you have defined your readiness for something. And it's necessarily a mind shift that is required. And most of people think, you need to be fully prepared. As Aranthi said, you need to be 100% ready for you to take on something. But most of the time, confidence get built when you take responsibilities and act on certain tasks. So my advice is, don't wait for everything to be ticking. Ask the question, why I may not be ready, but why can't I learn through while I'm doing the job? So do I really need to know everything to get into a role, to get into an additional task? Is something that the generation needs to think about. And you can put it in different way. Am I willing to learn something? Will I be able to get something by stretching myself a bit out of my comfortable zone? Another challenge, I think, is the imposter syndrome, where we always think, I think this is basically for women, we always think, despite having abilities and experience, we start questioning ourselves whether we are good enough, whether we have everything for us to taking certain responsibilities. We think about ourselves very small. So it's something that you need to remind yourself about. What are your accomplishment, your strength, reflecting on your success and positive feedback that you've received, and build upon those strength and accomplishment to build on that confidence that you think that you may not have. And also it grows through small courageous steps, like you taking on opportunity, ask a question in a meeting, volunteering for a new responsibility, applying to a role that you think you're not 100% ready, but you still can learn through the job. These small steps also keep on adding to one's confidence building, Samanthi. And as I said in the previous remarks, mentors and sponsors also play a bigger role. So finding out right mentors, sponsorships that you can utilize to build that confidence is also very supportive when it comes to younger generation building on the confidence level and bridging that gap that they have. And something that again we as women struggle with, we wanted to be a perfectionist, and there is saying to say perfection is enemy of good. this is even to me, you know, sometimes I only need the data, but I wanted it to be, you know, nice formatted table or graph. You know, because I am a perfectionist. I want everything to be in proper form to come into me. When I deliver, I want it to be, but sometimes you don't necessarily have to. And sometimes because you think you want it to be perfect, you lose that confidence in certain areas where you really can take up challenges. And again, you know, if you can build on supportive community, peer networks, also will support in building confidence for individuals. And as I said, confidence doesn't come always before the opportunity. Very often it builds with the work that you are giving, you're going to take up, and you'll be continuing on. So it's a step forward that you need to consciously take with little uncertainties. But I'm pretty sure, you know, these little actions that I mentioned before will help to build on the confidence levels of the individuals.
Thanks, Shamila. Let me now move to Dr. Vagisha. From a macroeconomic perspective, what are the most critical rights-related gaps preventing women and girls from fully participating in Sri Lanka's economy? Over to you, Dr. Vagisha.
Thank you for the question, Samanthi. From a macroeconomic perspective, I would highlight three major gaps that also have direct implications for business and the private sector. The first would be the labor market participation gap. And as I mentioned earlier in my opening, only about 1/3 of working age women in our population actually participate in the labor force, right? So for an economy trying to expand productivity and growth, this represents a very large pool of underutilized talent. The number two, the second gap, relates to the structure of employment. Many women who do participate in the economy, they are concentrated in informal work, micro enterprises, or very low-paying sectors most of the time. Even within this entrepreneurship, I think women represent only about 20 to 25% of MSME owners. And these businesses often face barriers to scaling up, right? So they're relegated into very small micro segments. And number three, the third gap, is access to finance and productive assets. Sri Lanka has high levels of financial inclusion in terms of account ownership, but when we look at access to business credit, investment capital, and financial networks, women entrepreneurs are still at a disadvantage. And I'm sure that Naina could elaborate on this. So for the private sector, these gaps matter because they affect your talent pipelines, right? Your entrepreneurship ecosystems and your market growth. So in other words, closing these three gaps is not simply about equity. It's also about unlocking economic potential and expanding productive capacity of the economy. If you allow me one more minute, I want to come back to Professor Vatavala's question about the population decrease. In his remarks, he mentioned this. It's a very important point. In Sri Lanka, like in many middle-income countries, I mean, we have a demographic transition. We're in the middle of it. Slower population growth and an aging population, as he correctly pointed out. Now, traditionally, this is seen as a challenge because it can reduce the size of the future workforce, right? But on the other side of this equation is that Sri Lanka has a very large pool of underutilized human capital today, and they're mostly women, right? So, and as I said earlier, it's 1/3. Right? Only 1/3 of working age women actually are in the formal labor force, despite high levels of education and skills. So before we even think about population expansion, I think there is a major opportunity to increase labor supply and productivity by enabling more women to participate fully in the economy right now. So countries like Japan and several European countries have taken this path, responding to aging populations by increasing female labor force participation as one, two, improving workplace flexibility, and three, and very importantly, investing in the care economy. So in Sri Lanka's case, demographic change is certainly a challenge, but it also highlights a very practical policy opportunity. So if we unlock women's economic participation, we can significantly strengthen the workforce even without population growth. So just wanted to add my 2 cents there. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, my next question is for our keynote speaker, Dilrukshi. So given your experience in overseeing HR in a traditionally male-dominated sectors, such as automobiles as well as agriculture, what rights-related challenges do women most commonly face, and how does your organization work to dismantle these gender-related workplace norms?
Thank you for that question. So not only auto or agri industries, but in many industries, I think one of the main and most consistent challenge women face is not just access to roles, but acceptance within those roles. Because I have experienced this way back in 2012, I wanted to train an entire batch of mechanics through our vocational training center and deploy them in the workshops. So it went, I mean, it was very, very difficult to recruit them. We had to do a lot of convincing to their parents and to the girls, but somehow with a lot of incentives, like, we recruited them, we trained them, and then we deployed them in the workshops. They were good. But what I experienced and what I saw was the acceptance within those roles were not there by the men. So it is very important that we understand it is not just giving access to conventional or unconventional roles, but what is more important is the acceptance by the other colleagues. Because one thing is, mostly operational environments are designed around male participation, which means women often encounter issues such as unconscious bias. So the environment itself is not very friendly. Limited access to technical training. So this is what I was trying to address. Lack of safe reporting mechanisms for harassment, and sometimes even inadequate facilities or safety provisions. So these are some of the barriers that I have seen. And also beyond that, women in operational roles frequently have to work harder to prove competence beyond, because leadership expectations are still unconsciously shaped by gendered norms, right? We have to sometimes work doubly hard to prove ourselves. So at Demos, we are working to dismantle these norms in 3 main ways. Actually, I think to a large extent, we have put the infrastructure right. So tomorrow is my Women's Day celebrations. So my main objective is to find out whether these systems are working. So let me tell you, first what we did was we actively reviewed recruitment and promotion process to remove bias and ensure women are considered for operational and technical roles and all non-conventional roles. So we have to start that from attraction, from branding and everything, because predominantly we are perceived as a male dominant or, you know, a masculine company. The second is we invest in leadership development and mentorship programs that support women entering these sectors. We have a program called Powerfully You, or that every year we identify the budding young women and expose them for leadership training. And third, we emphasize workplace dignity and safety through strong reporting channels and zero tolerance policies for harassment. So there's a lot of unconscious bias training going on, and there are employee resource groups meeting every month. So there are a lot of mechanisms there to ensure that their dignity and safety is established. The goal is not just to bring women into these industries, but to create environments where they can thrive and lead. So this is what we are aspiring to do in the organization in order to the initial issues that I have seen.
Thank you, Dilrukshi, for your candid response to that question. Let me again go back to Chamira. Chamira, you have a lot of experience in the BPO industry, and which primarily employs a lot of people from finance, accounting. So in the outsourcing industry, we do employ a lot of young women. What rights-related protections are still lacking, particularly regarding safety, night shift conditions, and career mobility in the BPO industry?
Yeah, so you're right, Samanthi. I think most of the time, outsourcing industry has been a starting point of a step into financial independence and professional exposure for a lot of young women. There are, rights that has been protected, but I think there is enough room for us to improve on as well. Safety specifically for women who's working in the night shift is an area and biggest concern at the moment. Because if you take outsourcing companies, most of these companies are serving for global clients where your serving times are different. So you tend to work long hours or overnight, depending on the customer facing roles that you are in. So in terms of providing the safety, security within the organization and the times that they are coming in and going out of their employment is something that is really to be looked after. Clear safety protocols, security transport arrangement, and even escalation metrics at right levels is something that I think the industry can really working on. And also something related to that point in terms of night shift is the working condition that the focus needs to be also given in, because when you work regular overnight shifts, it's take a toll on your physical and mental well-being. So organization needs to think about how do we do fair shift scheduling and breaks and safety during the working hours, health and safety both during the working hours. I don't think we have given enough emphasis on that, because one thing is culturally this working time is still to be accepted in the accounting, fraternity accounting areas. I know there are other fields like healthcare, tourism, where this is being facilitated, but in the accounting fraternity, our profession is still to embrace this working patterns and time. So a bit of emphasis needs to be given by the outsourcing companies on those areas. And something also to be looked at is, again, strong system in addressing harassment and discrimination. This is something because it's basically younger generation joining in at the entry level. So how do we make sure that they understand there is opportunity for them to raise concern confidently, with keeping the confidentiality with them? Do we have policies in the organization to protect those areas? Are something that companies can really work on in the area of the BPO sector is being concerned.
Thank you, Shamila. I will now move to Eranti again. So, Eranti, what challenges have you seen in meeting international standards regarding rights of female workers, mainly in the para sector, and how has Sri Lanka addressed these gaps compared to our competitor countries?
Okay. So if you actually look at overall the apparel industry and some of the competitor countries, I've had some experience having visited those factories or interacted with those some of these industry organizations in those particular countries. I would say, as a country, Sri Lanka is doing well. We have actually positioned our industry as an ethical manufacturing destination right from the word go. If you really kind of look at how brands perceive us, they perceive Sri Lanka as a country that has less risk or low risk. If you really also look at factors like child labor, forced labor, etc., which are very concerning factors in the apparel industry, I would say Sri Lanka probably does not have that kind of factors or violations or risks, right? So that's the positive aspect of it. However, I would like to kind of bring in two aspects. One is the law, the labor laws of Sri Lanka. We have very archaic, fairly obsolete laws. To give some examples, the Factories Ordinance was formulated in 1942, right? We still use that pre-independence law. Of course, there have been some amendments, but I would say those amendments are not significant, right? Then we have the Women, Children and Young Persons Act, which has been brought into a law in 1956. The Shop and Office Act, I believe a lot of the audience today is governed by, and also in the apparel industry, the officers are governed by, has been formulated in 1984. Again, there have been certain amendments that have been brought in, however, not sufficient, right? So these are very obsolete, archaic laws. And if you really look at it, I am pretty sure it was a group of men who sat around the table and drafted these laws and brought them into effect. So I'm sure a lot of benevolent sexism went on, because if you really look at it, there are restrictions under the Factories Ordinance and the Women, Children and Young Persons Act. Women can only work 10 nights a month. There are overtime limits only for women, right? No overtime limits for men working in factories. And when women are working in the night, there are so many restrictions, there are so many requirements that need to be met. Like there has to be a woman supervisor, there has to be, certain safe conditions, transport provided. All of this is great. And I do understand, on the one hand, why they have been put in place to protect the women, right? And maybe even kind of to ensure that their homes don't get disrupted by the mothers or the wives being away, etc. That's on the one hand. But on the other hand, there is evident discrimination, right? Which prohibits, or which kind of influences in the recruitment, promotion, right, of women in the workplace. So if you really look at some of the more progressive countries like in the Europe or the Nordic countries or countries in the European Union, they give parental leave, whereas we give maternity leave. So just by, these kinds of laws being in place, there is influence to create bias, to recruit, promote men over women, right? So this is one angle that I actually want to talk about, wanted to kind of, impress upon yourselves. The second one is already what Dilrukshi touched on as well, in terms of the safety of the women. Again, we are talking about women today, but I would like to say when it comes to workplace harassment and abuse, it's not only women, the men, right, and other genders are also impacted negatively by workplace harassment and abuse. Not enough laws protecting anybody who's getting harassed. I mean, there are laws. There is a criminal law that protects workplace harassment, be it men or women. However, when it comes to criminal law, you're required to really prove a case beyond reasonable doubt. So that also kind of, brings in more complications when there are issues of harassment and abuse. Of course, there are so many other, before anybody even brings up a complaint, as Dilrukshi mentioned, there are lots of other factors to consider in terms of like stigma attached, all of that as well. So I would say, to wrap up my segment here, there are concerns relating to Sri Lankan law, labor laws, and in practice, the legal system also that doesn't really support taking, action against in certain situations. But in addition to that, I would say Sri Lanka is, by the brands in the apparel industry, considered an ethical destination, a low-risk destination when it comes to social compliance, health and safety. And therefore, I would say our apparel industry's preferred competitive advantage.
Thank you, Aranti, and good to know that we do have a competitive advantage as Sri Lanka. As we are approaching the last 10 minutes of the panel discussion, my next question is for Nayana. So, Nayana, I'm actually going to combine two kind of simple questions for you. What role should men and boys play in promoting gender justice, and what practical actions can institutions take today to advance gender equality? At the same time, if you were to change one aspect of the entrepreneurial landscape to unlock like thousands of women-led businesses in Sri Lanka, what immediate action would you take? So about the role from alliances with males as well as the action that you would say. Over to you, Nayana.
Thank you, Samanthi. Just before coming to the question, let me add a little bit on what we discussed so far quickly. Actually, when it comes to challenging the cultural norm, actually, if we want to make advancements on this, we need to challenge the deeply rooted cultural norm. So I would say we really need to start and change our curriculum in the schools, universities, and the higher educational institutions, and we need to inculcate all these changes from the policy level to these institutions. So we need to start from the beginning and do these changes if we want to see a real change. So as we really need to make changes on the cultural norms, because everything else, I would say, fall in line if we have these changes in place. Just adding a little bit on what Dr. Vagisha said. So when I was leaving from the conglomerate that I worked before to start with this my company, actually my mom was asking, do you really want to make this change? Because that is the challenge we always face in our cultural norms, right? So we usually typically would like to work in a company, or we would like to work as teachers. So that is the norms that we really generally accept in the cultural grounds. So no one would accept to entrepreneurial role as a privileged thing. No one would accept in the normal cultural aspects. So that is the area where we really want to challenge if you want to make a real change in the world, and if you want women entrepreneurs on the economy. So those things to be challenged, and that has to be corrected from the beginning. And coming to the question, Samanthi, definitely it is not only women's issue, it is really a human's issue. So both women and men should get on board to correct this issue. So then only we can thrive and we can achieve our levels that we want to achieve, either on the entrepreneurial level, or either on, if you want to get the best out of women, both should get together and support each other to get the best out of them. And when it comes to the question you ask, what change I would like to do on the entrepreneurial level, most of the rural women plus the first generation entrepreneurs don't have the access to the most of the things that they would need, like digital knowledge, sometimes on the financial knowledge and things like that. So because of that, main change that we would do is the mainly on the incubator programs, where they can get learnings, and then they can get access to the skills that they would need. Some of the universities in the country has done some initiatives, but those are not progressing because of the financial restrictions and things like that. So if we all can get together and support those incubator programs, that would be a most advantageous thing that we should do.
Thank you, Nana. Now I will come back to Dr. Vagisha. How can national economic policies be redesigned to ensure justice for marginalized groups of women, including those in informal employment, rural communities, as well as unpaid care work? Also, if you were to recommend one immediate policy intervention to accelerate gender responsive economic transformation in 2026, what would that be? Over to you.
Okay, to ensure economic justice, I think policy needs to better reflect the realities of how women participate in the economy now, right? So first, governments need to recognize the economic value of the care economy. Many women are constrained in their ability to work because of childcare and family responsibilities. So investments in childcare services, they need not be all public. They could be public, private, a mix of both, right? Flexible work arrangements, safe transport. I think this is a topic that not very many people talk about in Sri Lanka, but safe transport, consistent and safe transport, affordable transport, can significantly increase women's labor force participation. From a business perspective, these are investments in workforce availability and productivity. Second, policy should focus on supporting women-led enterprises to grow and formalize. Now, many women entrepreneurs operate in small or informal businesses, as you correctly mentioned, and they face barriers to accessing formal finance, markets, advisory services, and so on. So targeted credit programs with, say, portfolio guarantee schemes, financial literacy is very important, and most importantly, simplified regulatory processes can really help enterprises scale up. Minor example, but it has a major impact, is the speed at which one could get a business registration in this country, right? It takes a long time still. It should be 1 hour, and it should be online, right? This would help a lot of businesses register and become formal. And another important point is the role of the financial sector. So banks, non-bank financial institutions, they can design financial products that are more accessible to women, women entrepreneurs and small businesses, while they improve outreach and risk assessment models. So ultimately, I think economic justice means creating an environment where women can participate not only as workers, but also as entrepreneurs, investors, and decision makers. And to your second follow-up question on one immediate policy intervention to accelerate, gender responsive economic change in 2026. I don't know whether this can be done in 2026. Okay, so but if I had to recommend one priority intervention, it would be to institutionalize gender responsive budgeting and investment planning within the national economic policy framework. So for those of you working in finance and accounting, this essentially means applying the same analytical lens we use in corporate budgeting to public finance. So asking who benefits from spending decisions, whether resources are being allocated in ways that maximize economic participation and productivity. So, for example, strategic investments in, say, childcare infrastructure. It could be skill development. It could be safe and affordable transportation, digital access, and financing for women-led enterprises. They can have a very high economic return because they enable more people to participate productively in the economy. So in a sense, I think this is what I would put forward: gender responsive budgeting, not simply as a social policy tool. I think it's a way of improving economic efficiency, human capital utilization, and of course leading to long-term growth. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagesh. I loved how you used simple examples to explain some complex economic theories to this forum of primarily finance-related professionals. Thank you so much. Love that part of the discussion. So as we approach the last two questions, Chamila, this is for you. How can professional bodies like SAFA, which you also represent as the chairperson, Women's Committee chairperson, translate principles of justice and gender equality into measurable actions, particularly in areas such as leadership representation, pay equity, as well as gender responsive policies? Over to you, Chamila.
Samanthi, I think it's not necessarily SAFA itself. I think even if you take Sri Lanka for that matter, there is a lot that we as professional bodies can do in terms of bringing policies that support the organizations, the economies to get into areas where we think gender equality can be brought in. And some of the areas that from SAFA perspective that we have looked into is in terms of identifying where we can make influences in terms of leadership, where we have, at least in our region, we have made sure that we recognize women, we give opportunities for women to come on to a leadership position from professional bodies, from SAFA board itself, and also in supporting developing policies where, we, Sri Lanka, is pushing through having at least 25% board member representation from females. So these are some of the areas that we have been pushing through in terms of a regional perspective. And also we are building research, and we are investing on research in terms of identifying how as a community, as a region, as professional bodies, we support women, identifying what are the challenges that they currently face. Some of the challenges that we've seen is that, we have a lot of entry of women into the profession, but in the latter part of it, we see a lot of drop downs because of the family matters and not having opportunities for leadership position. So we are trying to understand what are those challenges and invest on areas where we can support, like providing job opportunities, working from home opportunities, and investing on upskilling them when they take a career break, when they wanted to come back to the workforce again. There is a gap in their competencies and capability levels. How can we help them in terms of getting those skill set, investing on technology where women can really be participating into the workforce from home, and also providing certain safety for women, where in certain jurisdictions in the SAFA region itself, we found that the security and the safety for women is not available. So we are working towards bringing that together, and not only in the region, we have been actually working with professional organizations like CAPA, IFAC, International Accounting Standard Board, and so on, to make sure we work collaboratively with organizations outside the region to bring best practices, policies, and guidance to women, and create opportunities for them outside the region also, to ensure that they have the career growth, they have a talent pipeline is being built. These are some of the activities that we have from SAFA perspective been looking at, Samanthi.
Thank you, Chamila. And honestly, I'm sure most of the participants here are looking forward to seeing action and results from all the work that is being done. My final question to wrap up today's panel discussion would go to our keynote speaker, Dilrukshi again. So Dilrukshi, what is one bold HR intervention that you believe the industry should adapt within the next year, with coming year, to create a more safer, more inclusive, and more equitable workplace for women and girls in the sectors? Over to you.
Thank you, Samanthi. I'll keep it as short as possible. I think one bold intervention I believe the industry should adapt within the next year is trying leadership accountability. I think many speakers touched upon this directly to diversity and inclusion outcomes. Today, DEI is driven by HR mostly. So this should not be the case. So this means setting measurable targets for female participation. It's not just by HR policies, but by the board itself, right? So we need to set measurable targets for female participation, retention, and advancement, particularly in operational and technical roles, because there's a lot of stereotyping of roles and there's a lot of bias. So it is very important we encourage more women, of course, from the primary education itself to STEM areas, and even in organizations and by the governments. We need to encourage more women participation in STEM. So thereby the organizations can recruit and deploy women in non-conventional roles. So this is one of my pet areas as well, particularly certain technical roles, and linking leadership performance evaluation to those outcomes. At the same time, organizations should establish independent and confidential reporting systems for workforce harassment and discrimination, ensuring women feel safe to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. Actually, we have done this quite well, I think. Some time back, we established a harassment reporting line with a third party, independent party. And I think prior to that, we did not get many reports. But of course, there were like very insignificant, like performance issues and all of that comes in these, through these harassment lines. But of course, there were a lot of areas were brought into our attention, and we have addressed many of those, and we have created policies around that. So when leadership is accountable and reporting systems are trusted, cultural transformation becomes very, very possible. So creating safer and more equitable workplaces is not just a rights issue. It is also critical for building resilient, innovative industries. So it is every leaders, every corporate leaders or boards, like, especially, I think their responsibility.
Thank you, Dilrukshi. It was really refreshing listening to your action plans and your vision, and sincerely hope that this will be more widespread as we move forward in 2026. So that brings us to the end of the panel discussion. Let me hand over back to the CMA organizers for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Samanthi, for guiding this conversation to understand the challenges as well as solutions from this diverse panel of experts. It was really interesting to hear everybody's viewpoints as well as the solutions and recommendations and even the policy changes that we're recommending. Let's hope. And also when looking at these attendees, something that really came to my mind is we have a lot of male participants also in this forum. So it makes it very interesting. I want to say a special thank you for those gentlemen to actually taking time to listen to this conversation. It makes it so much interesting to have that participation here as well. Now, to do the vote of thanks, I would like to hand over to Mahesh Malavarachi, Council Member, International CMA Women's Leadership Committee. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Anjani. Very good evening to everyone. As we come to the close of this meaningful celebration of International Women's Day 2026, held under the global theme Right, Justice, Action for All Women and Girls, it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Ms. Dilrukshi Surya, the Executive Director of Diesel and Motor Engineering PLC, for delivering and inspiring the thought-provoking keynote address. With your valuable insights on leadership, resilience, and the advancement of women in decision-making roles have truly enriched today's forum. Our heartfelt thanks also goes to our distinguished panelists, Ms. Nayana Ranatunga, Dr. Vagisha Gunasekara, Ms. Chamila Kure, and Ms. Eranthi Premaratna, for sharing your expertise, experience, and perspectives. Your contributions have highlighted the importance of inclusive leadership and the collective responsibility we share in empowering women across all sectors. I would also like to extend my gratitude to Ms. Samanthi Karyavasa, the Director of Finance of Famous Hospitals PLC, for skillfully moderating today's panel discussion and guiding this insightful conversation with great professionalism. Our sincere thanks also goes to Ms. Darshini Vatwala, Chairperson of CMA Sri Lanka Women's Leadership Committee, for her warm welcome and for leading this important initiative with bring attention to the gender equity and women's leadership. As always, being the backbone, Professor Lakshman Vatwala, for wonderful guidance in every step. A special word of appreciation must also go to CMA Sri Lanka Women's Leadership Committee for organizing this event and their continued dedication for promoting diversity, inclusion, and leadership development. We also acknowledge CMA Secretariat, Ms. Shanti and Ms. Rakshika. Thank you for your valuable assistance in making this event a success. Finally, and most importantly, we thank all participants who joined us today for our show. Your presence, engagement, and support have made this celebration truly meaningful. Let's continue to work together to uphold the values of rights, justice, and action, ensuring a future where women and girls everywhere have given opportunities to lead, contribute, and succeed. Thank you all, and wish you all a wonderful evening ahead.